Stay with me until the end, because this isn't just a story about an HOA gone rogue. It's a lesson in property rights, federal jurisdiction, and what happens when you put facts on the table and refuse to blink. If you've ever dealt with HOA abuse, boundary disputes, or people who thought they owned you, you'll want to hear this. Drop a comment with where you're watching from, and if this resonates, hit like and share it with someone who loves a good plot twist. I closed on the land 2 weeks before the shouting started. 2 acres, an old lake, and the first stillness I'd felt since my mother passed. I paid $85,000 for it in suburban Georgia. Too cheap, most people would say, but I've been a land surveyor and title examiner for 11 years. Boundary disputes, chain of title searches, bad deeds that looked clean until you crawled into a courthouse basement with a flashlight. I'd done my homework. The deed was clear. No easements, no covenants, no HOA jurisdiction. The 8-acre lake sat fully within my parcel. That first morning I set up my transit by the cattails. The water lay dark and quiet, a crown of wild grass around it. I was marking boundary corners when 3 people walked up from the neighboring subdivision. A woman in her early 50s led the way with that clipped confidence you only get from years of unchallenged authority. 2 men trailed her, one carrying a thick binder. "Excuse me," she said as if I'd interrupted her. "I'm Margot Sinclair, president of the Meadowbrook Homeowners Association. This lake is community property. You'll need to review our lake maintenance regulations before you do anything here." She nodded to the man with the binder. "Clayton has copies of all 47 rules you'll need to follow." The third, a gray-haired man with gentle eyes who introduced himself as Philip, the treasurer, hovered a step back. I kept my tone even. "I appreciate the introduction. I've reviewed the deed. The lake is included in my property. There's no recorded easement granting access to anyone else." Margot's smile didn't reach her eyes. "We've managed this lake for 20 years. Everyone knows it belongs to the community. Your deed must be wrong." I pulled up the recorded deed on my phone, county stamp clear as day. "This came directly from the clerk's office. The lake sits within my boundaries. Your covenants don't list it as common area." Clayton peered down his nose. "Are you sure you understand what you're reading? What do you do for a living?" That tone. I've heard it my entire career. "I'm a land surveyor and title examiner," I said. "Boundary disputes are my specialty." Margot cut in. "If you continue trespassing on community property, we'll have no choice but to call the authorities." I took out my phone and calmly photographed 3 things. The private property sign I'd installed that morning, GPS coordinates burned in a woo, the metadata, my deed with the county seal, and the 3 of them standing on my land threatening me. "You're welcome to review your HOA bylaws," I said. "You'll find no mention of the lake, because it's never been part of Meadowbrook." Philip's mouth opened to say something, but Margot's look silenced him. "We'll be in touch," she said, spinning on her heel. They called the police on me 3 times that day. The officers were professional each time, boots crunching across the gravel as they walked the line with me. I laid out the deed, the survey, the recorded plat, the title insurance. They climbed into their cruisers and confirmed what I already knew. I was the legal owner. Each visit went into my incident log, badge numbers, timestamps, dispatch recordings if I could get them. By sunset, the pattern was obvious. 3 separate 911 calls in 6 hours, all from the same complainant, all claiming the HOA owned my lake. It wasn't confusion, it was coordinated intimidation. And if there's one thing 11 years of title work has taught me, it's this. When someone claims authority they don't legally possess, there's always a paper trail showing exactly when they started lying. That night, with the last light dying over the water, I sat on my truck's tailgate and thought about my mother. She used to say land is the only thing no one can take from you, if you know how to hold on to it. I planned to prove her right. The first time I toured the property 3 months earlier, something about the eastern edge of the lake bothered me. The shape was irregular, like 2 ponds had merged. A shallow channel narrowed into willows and disappeared under sediment. It reminded me of old drainage features I'd seen on farm surveys. The kind that gets swallowed by time until only the land remembers. Back then, the title search came back so clean I moved forward anyway. But that channel kept nagging me. So the next morning, I pulled on chest waders and waded into the eastern shallows with a soil probe. 40 minutes of mud, algae, and cold water later, the steel rod hit something solid, concrete. I scraped the silt back with my hands and found it. A 36-inch culvert angled into the lake bed, water moving through it with a definite pull. I photographed it from multiple angles with GPS coordinates embedded in the image metadata. I measured the diameter and the depth below the waterline, then climbed back to the tailgate and opened my laptop. Title 33 of the Code of Federal Regulations, Section 329.4, Waters of the United States. Any water body with a physical connection to a navigable waterway, including culverts and engineered drains, falls under federal jurisdiction, the Army Corps of Engineers, and the Environmental Protection Agency. It doesn't matter if the connection is obvious. It doesn't matter if it's on private land. If the connection exists, federal authority applies. I pulled up a 1947 USGS topographic map. There it was, Sweetwater Creek, running parallel to the lake's eastern boundary with a notation for engineered drainage infrastructure. A culvert, installed in 1947, with a maintenance permit issued by the Army Corps in 1952. That permit still existed in the National Archives. I downloaded it and saved it to 3 drives. This lake wasn't just a pond on private land. It was part of the navigable waterway system, the waters of the United States. Margot Sinclair didn't just have no authority. She'd never had it. I built an evidence binder like I'd built dozens for court. 6 tabs. Tab 1, culvert photographs, timestamps, GPS coordinates, a hand-drawn diagram showing the underground path to Sweetwater Creek. Tab 2, historical documentation, USGS map, 1947, and the Army Corps permit, 1952, both certified. Tab 3, legal framework, full text of 33 CFR paragraph 329.4, with a plain language summary and a flowchart tracing federal jurisdiction under the Clean Water Act. Tab 4, property documents, deed, survey, legal description from the original land grant, showing the lake always belonged to this parcel. Tab 5, HOA covenants and plat, Meadowbrook's 1995 covenants with every relevant section highlighted, and a county plat map showing the subdivision boundaries in red and my property in blue. The lake never fell inside their lines. Tab 6, incident log, 3 police calls with names and badge numbers, 4 emails from Margot, and screenshots from the HOA website falsely labeling the lake community property. I kept 1 binder. 1 went into a fireproof safe at my bank. 1 I uploaded to the cloud with redundant backups. Then I emailed the board. I have documentation concerning the legal status of the lake on my property that I believe the board should review. Please let me know when you are available to meet. We met on a Tuesday evening at the community center, folding chairs, fluorescent lights, and a faint smell of old coffee. Margot sat at the center of the table. Philip to her right, Clayton to her left, 2 other board members beside them. I placed my laptop and the binder on the table and sat across. There's no confusion on our end, Margot said before I'd even opened my screen. That lake has always been treated as community property. I turned the laptop toward them. In the 1940s, a culvert was installed connecting this lake to Sweetwater Creek. Sweetwater flows into the Chattahoochee River, a navigable waterway under federal law. Title 33 CFR paragraph 329.4 says that connection places this lake under jurisdiction of the Army Corps of Engineers. Local rules, HOA regulations, none of that overrides federal control. Philip leaned in, eyebrows knit. What does that mean for us exactly? It means your HOA can't regulate this water body, I said, sliding tab 5 across the table. And your covenants don't mention the lake at all. Clayton's mouth tightened. You're sure you're reading these documents correctly? What's your background again? Land surveyor and title examiner. 11 years. Boundary disputes, chain of title research, federal waterway issues. If you want a second opinion, hire your own surveyor. We've invested resources in maintaining that lake, Margot said, voice sharpening. If you continue making these claims, we'll pursue legal action for interference with HOA operations. I'm not making claims, I replied. I'm presenting facts. If you file, you'll be asking a judge to ignore federal jurisdiction and recorded property documents. Philip shifted. Do we have lake insurance? I've asked for a copy for months. I'll locate the paperwork, Margot snapped. I'd also recommend you provide documentation showing when and how the HOA acquired legal authority over the lake, I said. If that exists, I'd like to see it. If it doesn't, we need to have a different conversation. 2 nights later, an email hit my inbox. You should know what's really going on. It was from a woman who'd lived there 26 years. We met at a coffee shop 3 miles outside the subdivision. She arrived cautious, gray hair pulled back tight. I'm Beatrice Navarro, she said. The lake wasn't always managed by the HOA. She told me that in 2003, the lake belonged to an elderly man named Harper who died with kids out of state. Margot called a board meeting, proposed the association assume management, and a unanimous vote appeared in the minutes. No legal transfer, no deed, no recorded easement, just a neighborhood nod. How much have you been paying? I asked. $120 per household per year, she said. We have 180 homes. Over 20 years. More than $400,000. And no one's ever seen a detailed accounting. She slid a manila folder across the table. Inside were board minutes from October 2003. Motion to assume management of Community Lake approved unanimously. Beneath it, a list of 12 households who'd asked questions and received lawyer letters or fines. Georgia is a one-party consent state. Beatrice agreed to go on record if needed. She helped me circulate a petition under the HOA bylaws. 10% of members could force a special meeting. Within 4 days, 22 homeowners signed. Margot had to schedule the meeting. I arrived early the night of the special meeting with a borrowed projector and handouts. By 7, nearly 100 people filled the community room. Margot called the meeting to order. We'll hear from the petitioner, she said coolly. I kept it simple, no rhetoric, just jurisdiction, documents, and math. This lake connects to Sweetwater Creek via an underground culvert installed in the 1940s, I began, projecting the 1947 USGS map. Sweetwater feeds the Chattahoochee River, a navigable waterway under the Clean Water Act. Title 33, CFR, paragraph 329.4, places the lake under federal jurisdiction. Army Corps of Engineers. Local and HOA authority does not apply. I clicked to the covenants and plat maps. The Meadowbrook covenants recorded in 1995 don't mention the lake. The county plat shows HOA boundaries ending well short of this parcel. Despite that, the HOA has collected $120 per home per year for lake maintenance for 2 decades. That's roughly $430,000. Silence hit the room like a wave. Where did that money go? I asked. Landscaping, water testing, insurance, Margot replied. Exactly what we said. Show us, I said. Contracts, invoices, the insurance policy covering the lake. Philip spoke quietly. I've never seen a separate policy for the lake, he said, turning to Margot. Our general liability excludes bodies of water. An elderly man in the 3rd row stood, leaning on a cane. I've lived here since '98, he said. That lake belonged to Mr. Harper. The HOA had nothing to do with it. After he died, Margot told us we should take over managing it. I don't remember voting on legal authority. We just started. Hands went up. Can we get our money back? Why weren't we told? Voices swelled. I raised a hand. I'm not here to assign blame, I said. I'm here to clarify facts. The lake is on my deed. It's under federal jurisdiction. The HOA doesn't have authority to regulate it or collect fees for it. What happens next is up to you, but it should be based on accurate information. I propose an independent audit, Philip said, voice steadier. A younger woman seconded it. That's expensive and unnecessary, Margot snapped. If there's nothing to hide, it shouldn't be a problem, Philip answered. We took a show of hands. More than 70 in favor. Fewer than 20 opposed. The room decided. Margot adjourned abruptly and stalked out, Clayton on her heels. The shift was palpable. Authority had cracked. 2 mornings later, I found my gate chain cut, my private property sign spray-painted with thief, and a fresh, deliberate scratch down my truck. I called the sheriff's non-emergency line and documented everything. Photos, timestamps, GPS. The deputy advised cameras. By nightfall, I had 4 with cloud backup. 1 on the gate, 1 on the sign, 1 on the parking area, 1 facing the lake's eastern shore. At 11:43 p.m., the gate camera caught a white pickup slowing by my entrance, pausing, then rolling on. The make and model were clear enough. I'd seen it in Clayton's driveway. 20 minutes later, the sign camera captured Clayton standing at the edge of my boundary, staring toward the lake. He didn't step onto my land. He didn't have to. His intent was obvious. I sent the footage to the sheriff with a formal complaint. Then I drafted 2 emails, one to the Army Corps of Engineers, Atlanta District, one to the EPA, Region 4 Office. Subject: Request for jurisdictional determination and notification of dispute. I attached the USGS maps, the 1952 Corps permit, photos of the culvert, and the relevant CFR text. I explained the HOA dispute, the escalation, and the apparent unpermitted herbicide application visible in shoreline vegetation. The Corps called first. "You're correct," the regulator said. "The lake falls under waters of the United States due to its connection to Sweetwater Creek. We'll issue a cease and desist to the HOA and open a compliance review." The EPA called next. Water samples showed elevated phosphate levels consistent with herbicide runoff. The lawn company's records, subpoenaed by the EPA, showed a restricted use herbicide was applied in 2018 without an NPDES permit, a Direct Clean Water Act violation. A $45,000 penalty would be assessed against the HOA's fund, with potential individual penalties for board members who had authorized the application. The county stepped in too. 15 homeowners had formally requested an audit. County code required HOAs to maintain transparent records. The forensic review of the last 5 years showed $108,000 collected in lake maintenance fees, only $12,000 documented or twice yearly mowing of the grassy perimeter. The other $96,000, checks marked general maintenance and operational expenses, many written to cash or to vendors that didn't exist. One stood out, $85,000 to Lakeview Services LLC in 2019, a shell company registered at Margot Sinclair's home address, created 3 months before the payment and dissolved 6 months after. That's embezzlement. The district attorney opened a criminal investigation. Philip cooperated and received immunity. He admitted he'd signed what Margot put in front of him and had been denied access to supporting records. Clayton pled no contest to misdemeanor vandalism and criminal trespass based on the camera footage. $20,500 fine, 100 hours of community service, a restraining order keeping him 500 feet from my property. A court appointed a receiver to manage the HOA while a new board was elected. The forensic accountant traced lake fees back to 2003 to calculate refunds, about $2,400 per household on average. It wasn't full restitution, but it was something. The EPA's fine came out of reserves. The new board would have to figure out how to keep the community solvent after 2 decades of mismanagement. Margot took a plea: 3 years in prison, 5 years probation, full restitution of the embezzled funds. Watching her booking photo, I didn't feel triumph, just a quiet recognition that consequences had finally arrived. With the HOA restrained and the federal agencies engaged, I turned back to the lake. The Army Corps had confirmed jurisdiction. Now I needed permits for any work affecting the water's connection to the navigable system. I wasn't looking to dodge oversight. I wanted to do it right, the way it should have been done decades ago. The Corps suggested Nationwide Permit 27, Aquatic Habitat Restoration. I hired an environmental consulting firm to draft a plan. Their survey showed nearly 3 feet of silt and organic material, accumulated over 70 years, a partially blocked culvert, elevated phosphates from the 2018 herbicide, and low dissolved oxygen. The plan included 3 phases across 3 years. Phase 1, dredge contaminated sediment to restore the original depth, estimate $15,000, including disposal at an approved site. Phase 2, replace and enlarge the culvert to improve flow between the lake and Sweetwater Creek, $8,000. Phase 3, establish a 20-foot native vegetative buffer, grasses, sedges, shrubs, around the shoreline to filter runoff and prevent erosion, into $3,000. The Corps approved the permit with conditions. Establish the buffer and submit annual water quality reports for 5 years. I accepted. By late summer, the dredge crew had cleared the lake bed. Water clarity improved within days. Fall brought the new culvert, a larger pipe with a debris grate, designed to allow fish passage and better exchange with the creek. The surface showed subtle currents for the first time in years. In spring, we planted the buffer. The shoreline came alive, dragonflies, frogs, songbirds. I stocked the lake with bluegill and largemouth bass from a certified hatchery. The system began balancing itself. I launched a lake stewardship fund, voluntary donations only, with a transparent ledger. Neighbors contributed because they wanted the lake to thrive. The first year, the fund covered water testing, buffer maintenance, and a small reserve. No mandatory fees, no HOA threats, just stewardship. The county planning department asked me to present the project at a workshop on private landowner compliance with federal waterway regulations. I stood in front of 30 people, landowners, HOA board members, local officials, and walked them through the process. Jurisdictional determination, 33 CFR Paragraph 329.4, Army Corps of Engineers permits, Clean Water Act compliance, NPDES permitting, and how to avoid the mistakes that nearly sank Meadowbrook. The questions were practical. People wanted to do it right. That mattered. Beatrice won the special election and became the new HOA president. Her platform was simple: transparency, basic maintenance, open books. The lake disappeared from the bylaws entirely. Refund checks went out with breakdowns of contributions and recovered funds. The letter apologized for the years of mismanagement. People needed to read those words. A year later, I stood on a small dock and watched the water reflect the sky like polished glass. The vegetative buffer had filled in dense and green. A great blue heron waded in the reeds. Schools of bluegill flashed near the drop-off. The modest house I'd built sat 50 yards back, windows facing east to catch the morning light. My mother would have liked it. The HOA kept to the basics: roads, common areas, transparent financial reporting. Trust, I'd learned, grows from consistency, not demands. Clayton completed his community service and stayed away. He sent a letter apologizing. I wrote back, "I accept your apology. I hope you've learned something." I wasn't carrying the anger anymore. That weight would have been mine to bear, not his. In late summer, the Army Corps asked if I'd volunteer as an advisor for their public education program on waterway jurisdiction and landowner responsibilities. I said yes. Each year, I submitted water quality reports: stable dissolved oxygen, reduced phosphate levels, healthy fish populations reproducing naturally. The lake wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. People ask what changed everything. The answer is simple. I asked the right question and documented the answer. Who actually has authority here? Not who was loudest, not who made threats. Who had jurisdiction? The Army Corps of Engineers? Who owned the lake? The deed said I did. Who had collected $430,000 in lake fees without legal standing? The HOA under a president who thought repetition could replace law. It took patience, organization, and a willingness to let the process run its course. But the process works when you feed it facts. The Clean Water Act exists for a reason. Title 33. CFR Paragraph 329.4 isn't just words. It's a boundary line for power. Most HOAs don't know that. Some don't want to. But knowledge, my mother used to say, is the one thing nobody can take from you unless you let them. Finally, peace. And it was legal. If this story gave you that mix of satisfaction and relief that comes when facts win, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you've ever untangled a mess with documentation and perseverance, I'd love to read your story in the comments. Hit like, subscribe for more true stories about property rights, homeowners associations, the Army Corps of Engineers, and the quiet power of doing things the right way.